all know that the hardest part about every Monster Hunter title is the long hours of grinding left to chance. But what if I told you I can cut the time it takes to farm endgame materials, wilds, down to an hour or less with a farming method that will net you hundreds of relics and gems an hour? I'm going to break down exactly how you can cut farming and rack up hundreds of relics and gems without wasting any time. So this video is going to be broken down into two different methods. One to farm materials and one to farm for guild points, because the guild points are necessary to continue the farm. There are a couple things you need to get done before you can start this farm, however. You need to be at least high rank on chapter 4 to have access to the quest you need. You need to hunt any Balahara in the Windward Plains to obtain this quest, and you need to be able to rest, so complete any chapters that are preventing you from doing so. This farm is intended for the late game anyways. So by now you should have Sekka in the item trade when speaking to Nada if you have completed the main story, and once these requirements have been completed, we can move on to setting up the farm. There are 3 camps that you're going to want to have to set up before we begin the guide, because it makes everything way easier. The first 2 are in the Windward Plains, Area 4 West and Area 10 Southeast, and the 3rd camp is in the Scarlet Forest. It's Area 8 in the Underground Lake. Alright, so the first method, collecting flowers. Now this method entirely revolves around collecting night flower pollen in the Windward Plains and then turning them into Nada for gold melding and relic tickets. So let's begin. The first thing you need to do is restart your game and enter an online single player lobby. Accept the quest, The Desert Knows Not the Sea. You should have this from completing the steps that I mentioned earlier. And spawn at Camp 4 in the Area West. You can change which camp you spawn in when you select the quest. Once you spawn, look right and head straight until you meet a cliff. Press the required input and jump onto the platform ahead of you. For me, it's circle. You're going to fly a little bit forward. You're going to land on the platform, and the night flower will be right in front of you. Wait about 30 seconds to a minute, and the flower should start to bloom in front of you. Immediately after collecting the first flower, travel to the Area 10 Southeast camp. From this camp, turn around and head straight. The next flower is under the tree ahead of you. Once you collect both flowers, return from the quest and repeat this process until you have your desired amount of flowers. I've heard people mention that if you're fast enough, you can return from the quest, run out into the wild without starting a quest, and collect the flowers, return back to the base, and then quote-unquote double dip, and just start the quest again and repeat this process. I haven't found this to be very reliable, so I don't personally do it, but if you want to give it a try, you can. One thing to note about this farm, you must restart your game if you decide to do anything other than this farming process for flowers to spawn again. Also, sometimes this method will break, and after a couple runs, for whatever reason, the flowers stop spawning. If this happens, all you need to do is restart your game, and the flowers will continue to spawn again. Alright, so now you have your desired amount of flowers. It's time to start the resting cycle. Go to your camp and speak to Nada. Look at the trade for Sekka and see if you have any gold tickets available. To my knowledge, Sekka is the only trade that can give you these tickets, so you only have to worry about that one. It's also important to note that every time you rest, your item trades get filled, so this is also a good way to farm for those. After speaking to Nada and checking for tickets, go into your camp and rest for either plenty morning if you're in a follow, or follow morning if you're in a plenty. Once you rest, speak to Nada and check Sekka's trade for more tickets, go back into your camp, and rest for the opposite again. Speak to Nada and continue to repeat this process, changing from plenty to follow, and so on until you have the amount of tickets you want. Each melding ticket is worth 1200 points, the melding tickets meld gems, and the relic tickets meld relic fragments. We're going to take these tickets and we're going to go to the melder in Suja. The return on these tickets is absolutely insane. You could easily farm every gem in the game in a couple of hours using this method. As you can see though, the resting process takes a large amount of guild points in the long run, so this brings us to method 2, the guild point farm. Alright, so you remember that forest camp I had you set up earlier in Area 8 in the Underground Lake? This is where that comes into play. We're going to travel there, we're going to turn left, and we're going to swim through the area in front of us. You can collect the materials in here if you'd like, because they can be used to trade for certain things. Equip your capture net once you get to the other side and start catching everything you see swimming around. You also might get lucky and find an ancient Wyverian coin up on this little area. So platinum fish and grand Eskinites will net you the most points here, but we might as well get everything. After you catch them all, travel to any different environment and then back to the underground lake camp. This will reload the area and all of the fish will respawn. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you're fast enough, you might end up getting there before the fish have a chance to, spawn in, so you'll need to wait a couple seconds for them to start appearing. There are also times where you just get unlucky and nothing really seems to spawn, so I'd wait for around a minute at the maximum, but if you don't see anything, go ahead and reload. Now, as you can see, by combining both of these farming methods, you'll have enough guild points to continue resetting, and enough gold tickets to meld your endgame resources. This helps massively for finishing off any builds you've been struggling to find that best-in-slot gem for, and to finish those artisan rolls that keep giving you element boost. Why, Gemma? If you have any questions, feel free to comment below, and I will make sure to respond to them. Happy hunting!